Hello, Virtual Palooza, and welcome to our masterclass. This one is a super special one, and it features an incredible speaker who knows everything there is to know about everything in the global events industry. An award-winning journalist with a decade of experience, he has steered the illustrious CNIT magazine as editor to build it into an international powerhouse. He was recognized as one of the 100 most influential people in the events industry in 2019. So who better to talk to us about the future of our industry than the editor of CNIT, Callum DiLietto. Callum, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Although the idea of me knowing everything about the mice industry does make me a little bit nervous.
Everything. If you ever need any question answered, call Callum. Anything. Believe me. Just say Dave sent you, it's fine. All right.
A lot of people calling up my phone asking me some very random questions now.
I know. You can pass a couple on to me, but this is your problem now. All right. So we're going to start off. I know that you have been, obviously, as a thought leader in the industry, you've been talking with a lot of people, you've been presenting a lot. And I know that you guys did your own virtual event last week. And I hear it was a huge success. So tell me a little bit about it. What went well? What did you learn? What do you got?
Yeah, it's very weird, obviously, isn't it? Because I think everybody in this industry, they're extroverts, they crave human interaction. And also, when you're doing an event for event planners, they are the hardest customers. It's like doctors make the worst patients, event planners make the worst delegates. Mm-hmm. And so we were particularly nervous because it was our flagship event in the UK. It's for about 100 agency event planners and another further 50 suppliers. In total, you're looking about sort of 180 people altogether, all gathered usually in a venue for 2.5 days. We obviously restructured it slightly for it to be digital in order to kind of keep attention spans. So it was 3 half days where we tried to cram in just as much content and just as much interaction and fun as well. But leading up to it, I was so nervous because I was thinking, these delegates are really going to challenge us, shall we say.
Good word.
But it went really well. And I think that was down to a number of things. One, it was, our events team internally were really, really kind of adamant that they got the right technology. And they went through a massive vetting process of so many different offerings. Given who we were, everybody wanted to showcase their platform. So we were kind of spoiled for choice. And in addition to that, I think it was also getting the content right. So, just making sure that everything was hitting the mark perfectly, because in a live event, you can kind of get away with having some slightly less engaging content because they're already there and they're forced to listen. But having the content bang on was just so key in this instance.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting thinking about, we always used to say content is king, that was exactly our byline for forever, but now it's more true than ever. You cannot have a slot where people are like, you know what, I'm gonna just go walk away for a bit, because they're not coming back. They're in their houses. Yeah.
They've got an inbox on their emails and another tab, and it just takes them 5 seconds to flick over and then you're gone.
100%. So tell me a couple things that went potentially wrong in the back end and how you learned from that.
So as the moderator, I was constantly involved and, basically, steering panels and things like that. And I think at least once a day, there was an issue where my internet dropped, basically.
Yep.
And it was very, very quick. I'd be on and off very quickly. And obviously the panel were well briefed, so they would carry on speaking and talking to each other. And we had a backup presenter just in case my computer exploded. But I would say that there was potentially a minute over the course of the 3 days where I was missing at some point. So I think having very strong internet is key. And ideally, it would have been better to have a physical Ethernet cable rather than using Wi-Fi.
There's the key. There it
We
is.
just didn't have it. We didn't have it on this circumstance because we were using a temporary office because of COVID.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. And we actually have a segment from our vendor who hooked us up for our internet here. His name is Wi-Fi Joe. He does the internet for gigantic events. And he's got some really great tips. So make sure you guys check that out. There are some really innovative solutions that he's putting forward as to how to present from home, how to make sure that you don't get into that situation wherever you can. So check out that little V snack later on. But that's a great tip. Internet, unfortunately, the load is bigger than ever right now, right? So it's huge, and it's really visible is the problem as well. Once something goes wrong with your internet, world has collapsed. So
yeah, particularly if you're the host, I think it's even more noticeable.
There's that. Awesome. Well, we're here to talk about trends. We're here to talk about what's happening in the industry. And obviously, we all know right now the industry is in this situation where we can't physically meet, or we have to make sure that if we are meeting, that we are distanced, that we're taking care of our people, that we're making sure that we're safe. So what innovative solutions have you seen out there that gets you really excited?
So I love some of the imaginations that I think I've been kind of wanting to shake the industry and force them to use their imagination a little bit more over the last couple of years. But being stuck in the hamster wheel, often people are so busy they haven't had time to innovate, and they haven't had time to kind of think outside the box. Corona has forced people to do that.
There you go.
Which is great. I mean, obviously, don't get me wrong, the industry has taken a massive hit, but it has forced people to be innovative. And, just today, I was looking at one example where in Israel, in Tel Aviv, they've created a sail-in cinema. So you basically, the audience are on boats and they're watching a screen that floats in the middle of this lake.
Super cool.
I mean, I love that. I love that idea. I mean, obviously you've had drive-in cinemas as well. And I think, it's not just about cinema, but, there are theatre shows that are doing exactly that. And so why not have an award ceremony or a conference in that same format where you're utilizing a drive-in cinema space or a sail-in cinema, which I think would really kind of excite delegates as well. The idea of sort of sitting on a boat and listening to a keynote or something.
Yeah.
And yet they're still socially distanced.
I love that. And I think what's really interesting is that all of these things are actually happening in Austin. I think we have sail-in cinema coming next month. And I was at a drive-in theater on Saturday watching Back to the Future, which was awesome. But it's really interesting how these old concepts, old ideas are starting to resurface. People are remixing the ideas. And I've said this a few times where I find that creativity isn't really coming up with a brand new idea. It's remixing things that have already existed into something that people haven't seen before. So creating a drive-in theater is something that hasn't really been done before, but it's just combining two ideas that have been done over and over and over into something that people right now feel safe. I also saw that there was an outdoor concert, I want to say it was somewhere in the UK, where everyone had their own platform and they were kind of penned in. Is that a good word for it?
Yeah, it was a bit sort of farmyard pens on this massive field, and they were all 2 meters apart. But, a lot of the feedback from that was actually they preferred it in some ways because there wasn't that, getting crushed by the crowd as you listen to your, favorite artist or anything like that. And obviously within your social bubbles, you could still party and have fun and drink and, enjoy yourself. Yeah. But, I think it's a mix because obviously as the artist and the performer, I imagine you'd prefer to have a chaotic crowd in front of you where it's like sardines in a tin, and therefore the feedback for the performer is slightly less. But I think the actual experience is the best it could be, and if not better in some ways, just from a little bit of, like you said, remixing old ideas.
Yeah, I remember seeing I think it was in Italy, where they took over a hotel and did a concert, and everybody they basically bought a room instead of buying a seat. So everybody was safely distanced because they were in separate rooms on the balconies just watching this concert. So it was essentially like stacking your audience up. And one thing that we're working on and playing with right now is essentially doing the same thing, but virtually. So having projector screens, giant projector screens in front of a concert, in front of the band, so that they can see their audience bopping along or playing around or whatever they're doing. But I feel like it is about that feedback, that two-way communication, especially when it comes to energy for something like a concert.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been talking to some stand-up comedians about it as well, and there's been a few that have basically said that they refuse to do digital events just because they're not getting that, they're not hearing the laughter, or the laughter is not as organic as it might be, from a live event. And for a comedian that's just doing it for the laughs, it's a difficult situation to be in.
100%. That's a very interesting one, actually. I think there have been certain talents, I think, that have really thrived from this. Like, I can think of close-up magic, for example. That's one area where it actually works really, really well to be on camera, to be able to play around with that kind of material. But obviously there are other talents that just don't work as well. And I think it's been really interesting to see who innovates and who rises to the top. It's kind of like that shake it up and the cream rises to the top idea. And who hasn't yet found, let's put it that way, hasn't yet found the solution for how they can recreate or innovate or change how they do things. And I think comedy is a really interesting one for us to tackle soon.
Yeah, and I think it's, like you said, I love this idea of remix ideas, right? But, think about, when you talk about hybrid events and you look at, say, talk shows, if you look at the Jimmy Fallon show, right, for example, the audience in that room is maybe 100 people, but you could easily have 30 people, which at the moment is the limitation in the UK until the 1st of October. That would still give enough atmosphere for any potential acts or for panelists to come on and off, or have a small live event that is then broadcast just like a talk show to millions, and is still just as engaging. I mean, we've been watching these kind of programs for years and years and years, and we've loved them and watched them from beginning to end. And yet when suddenly that's turned, when a conference is turned into that format, suddenly people sort of panic and think, oh, it's not going to be engaging.
Far from the truth. Far from the truth. I think the way that we've kind of been explaining it to our clients is that bringing that element of live back, whatever level that will be in, and getting that two-way communication is paramount to a lot of, like we said before, the energy. Even if you're a CEO on stage trying to talk to your employees, you want to get that feeling back from them and understand. So 100% those hybrid events, in general, I think we need to think about all of these shows as TV. It's a rethinking of formats, because we're on TV right now, so the ability for us to broadcast to millions, as you said, is a gigantic positive, but it comes with a lot of new challenges and new things to think about that a lot of people just aren't used to. So it's just a little tweak to what you're thinking about, and then you can have a really successful hybrid event. You've also, we were transferring notes backwards and forwards, and you said that there were a few things that you've seen that can't really be replicated incredibly easy. Obviously, comedy is one of those. What other things have you seen out there that, let's say, we don't have a solution for yet?
Yeah, I think, I still think, I mean, entertainment as a whole, if you're looking at like award ceremonies and things like that, there is some weaknesses, as I say, comedy, but you can get around that with the right singer or songwriter or something like that. You can do that. But I think the key, and this is just purely by nature, is networking is one that's still, I feel, struggling a little bit, and it's just purely because of the lack of serendipity. digital events have different softwares and, chat rooms and basically going back 20 years to the days of chat rooms. But, the serendipity of bumping into someone at the bar or being a little bit tipsy and maybe having more confidence to talk to someone than you would, in another environment, or being able to, have a shot with your CEO or something, that kind of aspect I'm still yet to see a solution that kind of really, truly kind of can match it.
Capture that, yeah. And I guess the interesting thing about that is, in my mind, it's less about capturing the exact thing and trying to replicate it, because in those circumstances, I think you can't. I mean, you can have a drink before you go into your online networking if you want, but at the end of the day, that's still not going to give you the serendipity as you were talking about. But what I think is interesting is flipping the challenge and thinking about how we can do things differently to get as effective an outcome, but not necessarily the same outcome. So for example, I have worked a couple of times with a really interesting platform, and this is not a plug, but feel free to have a look at them. We have no affiliation with them. They're called Brain Dates. And they, in real life scenarios, were part virtual already. So you would suggest at a 3,000 person conference, you suggest a topic that you want to talk about, for example. And then up to 6 people can respond to that. And then that gets set up as a brain date. And you all talk, obviously, in that circumstance, around a table somewhere. You grab a coffee, whatever, sit down at a particular place, and they show you where that place is, and you talk. And obviously, that takes a lot of the stress and anxiety, I guess, out of networking, because you know that you're going there to talk about a particular thing. You know that you're already interested in that topic. So I feel like that can give you a lot of really positive outcomes from a networking perspective. But also, the power of that platform is the data that comes out of it. So you understanding what people are talking about at your conference, what everybody wants to know about, who your thought leaders are, who are attending all of these particular things and really engaging. So it can give you a lot of insight into who your audience is, what they want to talk about, and it can help you shift either your next event, or if you're that quick, your current event, to make sure that you're talking about what's engaging to your audience. So I feel like it's kind of this give and take, obviously, right now, of there are some things that we just can't replicate, but is there a slightly different alternative that may even give us bigger outcomes than we're used to?
Yeah, and I think that data and analytics piece is definitely a massive advantage of virtual events, because we've always had the advantage of having an online website that, by populating it and then assessing which content does well, that would then feed into the content producer and the production of our live events. Mm-hmm. But if you're just doing a live event, you don't have a content site like we do, and you don't have Google Analytics that you're analyzing every day, then having this virtual insight where you can actually see the interaction. Feedback is, feedback forms are great, and I think they still need a long way to go to evolve to the kind of caliber that they could be.
Yep.
But having that instant feedback where you're watching the interactions pour in, you're seeing the likes, you're just any kind of live feed where the audience is interacting and, saying LOL, you say, okay, well, they're engaged, or
yep.
If someone's maybe done an angry face, you can say, okay, well, maybe they didn't like when the speaker said that.
Yep.
But you often get that feedback that is unparalleled in a live event, and actually live event feedback is much harder to measure. You might hear a laugh, but you can't really record that.
Yeah, I was talking to our mutual friend Scott from Invent the other day, and we were talking about exactly that, the power of data and how his company is really harnessing a lot of the analytics power, but we're still nowhere near the abilities that we could be at. And I think this is actually one of the small silver linings of where we're at right now, is that that's accelerated that course. What you were talking about before, of people becoming more innovative in our industry, this is forcing us down that route of data analytics and being able to create new products around how we figure interactions are going during a live event. So I think that's a huge thing to watch out for coming down the pipeline. Switching over slightly, I think one thing that you did mention that can't be replicated very easily is partying. And I think partying is a really interesting one. Obviously, it's there's a DJ here in Austin that has become notorious for his Zoom lounge room parties, I think he calls them. He basically plays a set in his lounge room. Everyone can log in. His name is DJ Mel. Look him up. And he throws a party on Zoom. Everyone turns their camera on and they all just dance together. Look, again, it's not the same. And it's not going to be the same. And it's not trying to be the same. But it's interesting what elements of the fun of a live event people identified with in order to make that into what it has been, which is kind of this viral sensation in Austin. And, you know, you don't get that interaction between the crowd so much as you do interaction just with the artist. So it's definitely a weird and different and unique environment to be in, but he's making it work. So I think it's really interesting seeing how people have reinvented and played, and what becomes viral and what people catch onto and what doesn't. I don't know if data can help in that, because that would be super interesting to be like, yep, that idea is going to work. I don't think there's ever going to be a situation where we can analyze and predict whether a new idea will catch on. And I think that's the power of the human brain and the emotions and experience that's so important in our industry, and the talent that's in our industry to be able to identify that.
Yeah, I mean, another perfect example of that is, well, I think near the beginning of lockdown, I'm sure there was a rapper that performed a Fortnite concert.
I think I
can't remember who it was, and I'm certain it was Fortnite, but it was some sort of virtual game where you have avatar-based characters, and everybody obviously poured into the game to watch this, performer.
Yes, I remember this.
And that, in a way, solves that problem of crowd-to-crowd interaction as well, because you've got your avatars to your left and to your right within this sort of virtual world. And it's the very early stages of the Matrix, basically, and plugging yourself in and being able to, all of your senses being able to interact in a virtual sense. There's not. It is science fiction at the moment, but it's not far away.
It's really
to the point where that could be the future of conferences, and actually maybe we don't get on planes. We all just plug something into the back of our neck, and
we're going straight there, aren't we? Going straight with a hard wire into the neck. I love it. Did you ever watch the movie Ready Player One?
And that's another example. Exactly. Yes.
It feels very much like that. And we did the launch party at South by Southwest a couple of years ago for Ready Player One, and it's almost like we're starting to shift. It's not, like you said, it's not even almost like we're starting to shift. We are shifting into that world. And I'm almost certain, I was like, it's either Minecraft or it was Fortnite, but I'm almost 100% certain it was Fortnite. And the power of that online interaction. And I guess what the interesting thing about that is that it enables people who have social anxiety, for example, to participate in ways that they never have been able to before. So from thinking about that from a mental health or a disability standpoint, I feel like it's really interesting to think about the technologies that are out there that can enable people to interact in ways that we may not have been able to enable in a live setting. For example, let's take language. A multilingual show usually would require simultaneous translators who are in your ears, who then, I think the drawback of that sometimes is that you have the people who are walking around with their headsets and they're just listening to what's going on. And it's almost like there's that barrier then where you're like, well, I'm a Spanish speaker. So they may not get as much interaction with somebody who doesn't have the headphones on because people might be intimidated by that. Or, there's just all these little nuances where now it's like, well, all of that's kind of taken away. We can do automatic subtitles, for example, and use an algorithm. They need work still, but there are certain things that can work there. And then you break down that barrier. And like I said, if you've got social anxiety, being in a chat room and being able to talk backwards and forwards is a lot more comfortable for a lot of people who have social anxiety to then be able to make a connection. So in that circumstance, networking for them, this might be a godsend. So
yeah, and it's the same like you said about the disabilities as well. I mean, I know that there was already hardware of like an iPad on a Segway, basically going around a conference room and allowing people in wheelchairs to network. And although that's great and it's great for them, it doesn't necessarily still put them on the same playing field as those that were able-bodied and actually physically there. Whereas now, correct, everybody is on the same playing field because we're all locked in our rooms and therefore are interacting in the same way. So it definitely does open up doors for everybody.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting always having conversations with you about everything, where it's kind of just where your brain takes you, thinking about those different layers. And even we had a segment that everyone should check out, the masterclass with agencies, and it was just interesting to see how our conversation evolved. Like we structure our masterclasses very similarly, but the direction of those conversations move completely differently. And that's the power of the human brain, the power of the heart, the power of having multiple people with multiple different points of view and seeing where solutions take us. And I think that's probably the most exciting part of where we're at right now, with so much innovation needing to be happening in our industry, so many chances being taken, that I want to say that, again, a silver lining out of all this, if we can call it a silver lining, is that I think in the next year, the world of what we have access to in a live event is going to change entirely. There's going to be so many more products out there in the market. There's going to be so many new solutions, so many different ways that we can do things that we felt trapped, I guess, into doing in a live event. So I think it's just a super exciting time. What do you think about the future? How do you feel about the future?
Yeah, I think there is that aspect that you said earlier about, sort of shaking it and the cream rising to the top. I think there will be a level of survival that kicks in. And, that's not, I mean, it's positive in some ways, but obviously it does mean there'll be casualties. But I do think that, if we're skipping to the kind of medium to long-term future, you're going to have a level of innovation that there's a saying basically, and I think it originated in Israel, but it goes along the lines of necessity causes innovation or something like that. I'm butchering it probably. It's probably much more artistic than that. But it comes from the idea that, that country was forced to innovate because there were droughts. So they needed to come up with clever ways to move water around the country, or they were war-torn. So they had to come up with clever defense mechanisms and things like that. And I think this is a similar situation that the globe is facing. We've had that necessity where we've been forced to innovate, whereas before we didn't have to because we were kind of coasting on the existing infrastructures and the existing ideas. So I do think there'll be a fresh dose of technology and excitement around that. And it will be interesting I think people are going to start to boil down the purpose a lot more granular. I think historically people looked at an event and said, right, what are you trying to achieve? And everybody always, a good event planner will look at the objective of an event and measure against that. Mm-hmm. But I think that objective will become much more granular in the sense that this is the purpose, but what is the purpose? What really is the purpose? Is it, even an incentive, for example, incentives could potentially be the hardest in the sense that if we can't travel to these lovely, fancy, exotic places, mm-hmm. then, how can you incentivize people? But if you're trying to get the top performers to network together for example, maybe there are other ways to do that still reward them. Maybe it's the helicopter ride that is the incentive, not the helicopter over Niagara Falls, for example. Maybe that's what it is. Or, is it the fact that they're just getting that one-to-one time with the CEO or the board, which is therefore helping them progress in their career? And if that's the case, then maybe just a Zoom call, a one-to-one Zoom call with the CEO, which maybe isn't possible for all the employees, but for the top 50, he takes his time out to do that.
Yeah.
And if it's that once in a lifetime experience, then maybe that Zoom call is with, an A-list celebrity, and I mean, if I was on a Zoom call with Will Smith, I'd be like, wow, that was incredible. My company arranged a Zoom call with, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Awesome. Yeah. And that hasn't necessarily meant that I've had to get on a 12-hour flight and fly across the planet and, see things that I would never be able to see. And I'm, a massive fan of doing that. But there are ways that, if you boil down the purpose and you think, right, I'm trying to give them a once in a lifetime experience, what once in a lifetime experiences could I give them that doesn't require flying across the world? What other once in a lifetime experiences are there? And that's what will happen with conferences and everything else as well. Yeah,
for sure. What's been interesting is talking to DMCs. So we did another masterclass with DMCs about how they've been pivoting. And obviously a DMC is reliant on incoming people, usually, to showcase their destination. So seeing what they've been doing in the online world to still maintain some semblance of the excitement of a destination has been super interesting. So check out that masterclass as well. When you were talking about Will Smith potentially being on a Zoom call, I was like, normally if that happened, what would be like the VIP experience is getting to meet them backstage and taking a selfie with them. But I feel like now the COVID selfie would be like, I'm going to screenshot the Zoom call that has like Will Smith in the center, and that's what I'm showing out there. That'll be like the new I'm cool with a celebrity kind of thing. Super. Well,
I mean, apparently the reason I use Will Smith as an example is because there was a group of kids that had a Zoom call, a couple of months ago in lockdown, and somehow sent him the invite code and he joined them, and it went viral. And there was exactly that. There were screenshots of Will Smith in amongst these kids, and he's obviously kind of doing his usual inspirational talks and things. But, like you said, that's the kind of thing where people, and you can record those calls, you can record that whole interaction and keep that whole video of you having a whole conversation, which goes way beyond than any kind of just sort of selfie.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super cool. Super cool. I need to look that up after this. I love that. All right, we're going to wrap it up. But if there was one tip that you could give to our audience of pretty much everybody in the events industry, anybody who's been affected, what would you give them for the future?
I am eternally an optimist. And so I would say the one thing that I would say is just stay positive. Life is episodic in one way or another. And, it may seem like you've lost your job or you've lost your business or you've lost clients, and there have been some hits, but I think stay positive and you'll probably find that somehow or another, all of these tests and challenges will actually result in a very positive experience. And there's another saying, and I can't remember who says it, but it's something like, if it's not, again, I'm going to butcher it, but it's something like,
who invited you, Callum?
I know, right? I should really have learned these lines, but they just keep popping into my head. It's just memes.
I love it.
It's something like, if the ending isn't happy, then it's not the end.
I like that.
And it's along those lines. It's probably, again, more fluent than that. And I think that's the kind of philosophy that I have in life in general, but particularly in our industry. I think, we are going to go through some hard times and there are going to be some struggles, but there is always light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of along those lines of one of the first things that my husband ever taught me when we first met was that everything happens for a reason. And you may not know what that reason is right now. There's definitely a lot of hardships. And look, there are situations where if somebody close to you gets sick and, the worst might happen, you may feel like there's absolutely no reason that anything happened. But to that philosophy as well, I think it's important for me personally, and hopefully a lot of you, that we feel and we kind of take on that positive attitude of everything is happening for a reason. I may not know why it's happening to me right now, but what I'm going to do is the best that I possibly can to get to that next happy ending. And I love that as a piece of advice. I think this situation has highlighted mental health for me. And I know that, again, a silver lining of this is that now I feel everybody in the world has experienced what mental health issues can possibly feel like. And I think that that's a huge positive, because it means that we're now going to be able to talk about things a little bit more. And we're going to be able to help each other through moments. We're going to be a little bit more open to the fact that some people may have it harder than us. And that's, it's okay to feel certain ways. And if that makes us more resilient as a human race, that can only be a positive thing. So, reach out to your friends, reach out to your neighbors, reach out to anybody that you know if you're going through a tough time. Know that, that there are people who care about you, that if you want to chat to any of us, our information is on this app. Feel free to reach out. We want to create a positive experience in our industry and in this world. So exactly what Callum was saying, let's find the next positive steps and let's reach towards them as an industry, because I know that we can. We are a resilient bunch in the events industry. We're slightly insane, but I feel like that's kind of what gets us through. So I love that as a parting thought. Callum, thank you so much for your time. I love that you're bringing an international flair to what we're talking about here as well. And I love seeing what's happening in the UK, because it's incredibly different to what's happening here in the US. So there's another great tip for everybody out there. Open up your world and experience what everyone else is doing, because now we're enabled to do that. So again, thank you, Callum. Thank you for your time. Guys, I hope you've taken a lot out of this. So please officially thank Callum from CNIT.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions, like I said, feel free to put them in the chat box. Tag us on social media, hashtag virtualpalooza, or reach out to anybody via email. Everybody is here for each other. So like I said, let's make those first positive steps, and we will see you all very soon. Take care.